3 hours, and it's supposed to be a very hot day. And this is my view right now. So we are going to the most touristy spot for a photo op here in Palmyra, and it's this road sign right here. And we are out in the middle of nowhere. And we've got Christoph again from Sweden with us.
Yes.
Power walking.
Power walking.
Don't touch it, Matej.
Yeah.
Don't touch it.
Stay away.
Well, I think that one is seeing that so many cars.
So
I've driven
we
over
didn't came this way because it's the road from Homs to Palmyra. You
And-
take the other. That used to be closed. That's why this one is so famous.
Ah.
Because you need to go to Homs, then to Palmyra before.
And this is one of two of the greatest tour guides in Syria. Her name is Tulin, and her other half, her sister, is somewhere behind us.
Yeah.
So, have you been to this sign before, or is this your
Yeah.
first time?
No, I have been here before because usually we'll go to Homs, Latakia, and then Homs to Palmyra, then to Damascus. So,
We took the long route this time.
yeah. That one used to be closed because like military operations and things like
You're
that.
about to get hit.
Nah, you can. Yeah, it's our boss, so don't worry. He won't.
Why? So why do we have to walk all the way
I
here?
don't know, maybe
So the military made us get off the bus and walk all the way down here, and then they let our bus drive all the way down here. So maybe it's for the experience.
yeah.
I do want to acknowledge that I found out after the fact that the reason our bus was able to go past the sign was because we had a tour member with us who was blind and deaf, and so to make the site accessible for him, the Syrian soldiers let the bus take him to the sign. So shout out to them. After our photo op, we headed to the museum in Palmyra, and this museum is fairly famous for what happened here in 2015 when ISIS took over the city. The head of Palmyra refused to give up the location of the artifacts that were hidden because a lot of the artifacts in this museum were taken to Damascus, and the terrorist tortured him, and he refused to give up the location of where the ancient artifacts were located, and so they publicly beheaded him and hung him from a streetlight. There's a painting of him here in the museum on what seemed to be like a door of a locker, and so we'll see that in just a second, but you'll see throughout this museum that the faces on most of these ancient artifacts are destroyed, and that's because ISIS did not believe that you should make images of people's faces, and so they destroyed the faces and a lot of other artifacts here in Palmyra. And so even these smaller faces are destroyed too. And here we are coming up on the face of the head of Palmyra who was executed by ISIS, Mr. Khaled al-Assad, right here. And this museum doesn't have a ton of artifacts. I really wish I could have seen it in its heyday before ISIS came in, just because just the pictures I've seen on postcards and just in books are just incredible of all the different statues and faces that came from the sarcophagi. And so here's some with the faces still on them, but the majority that you'll see here are faceless, like these. One thing that separated these busts from their Roman counterparts was that they were rudimentary portraits and that they were high quality, but there were very little differences between sculptures. A couple of facts about ancient Palmyra before we go out and start exploring the ruins here is that the first inhabitants of this area date back to the 3rd millennium BC, and the ancient people of Palmyra became renowned as merchants who established colonies along the Silk Road and operated throughout the Roman Empire. And its inhabitants worshipped local Semitic, Mesopotamian, and Arab deities, and we will see later on in this video an ancient temple to Bel, who is believed to have been Bel Marduk, who was worshipped by the Babylonians. When most people think of ancient Palmyra, their minds go immediately to Queen Zenobia, who was its most famous ruler. She became queen when her husband was assassinated in the year 267 AD, and she led it into its expansion period, which you would call probably its golden age, and she ended up annexing Egypt and declaring independence from the Roman Empire, which did not end well for her and ended up leading in her being taken captive back to Rome. So this is the other half of our incredible tour guides. Sister of Tulin, this is Ola.
Hello.
And we are on our way to the tombs of Palmyra. And we are currently on our way to the hypogeum of the three brothers. We are in the Valley of the Tombs, and before ISIS came and caused tons of destruction here, there were towered tombs pretty much littered throughout this area. And this tomb that we're heading to, we know that it's the tomb of the three brothers because on the entrance of this tomb, there's the inscription of these three brothers' names. And I will put their names here because I'm not going to try and pronounce these names. The most famous tower tomb here in the Valley of the Tombs was the Tower of Elabel, and it stood 4 stories tall. It was partially restored in 1900, and it was divided into separate compartments to store sarcophagi, with each cell sealed with a carved and painted image of its occupant. It was blown up by ISIS in 2015, and I've got a picture of it right here so that you could see what it looked like. And I don't believe this picture does it justice, because nowhere else in the world have we found tower tombs like this. It is truly unique to Palmyra. And I do want to give you all an idea of where we are heading to today within the ancient city of Palmyra. So we start on the upper right-hand side in the city of Palmyra. We are taking a bus to the Valley of the Tombs. It is the circle on the upper left-hand side. From the Valley of the Tombs, we are taking a bus to the ancient Roman theater, which is the middle circle. And from the ancient Roman theater, we're going to be walking the Grand Colonnade to the Temple of Bel. And that's where we will be ending our tour today. And I do want to throw out one more thing for those of you who enjoy Bible history. So ancient Palmyra is mentioned in the Bible. It is known as Tadmor, and we see it in 2 Chronicles 8:3-4, where King Solomon took North Syria along with the Becca and Orontes valleys as far north as Hamath, and he built or rebuilt Tadmor to protect the trade routes and serve the northeast boundaries of his extended kingdom. And we have finally arrived at the tomb of the three brothers. This is probably one of the most famous underground tombs here in Palmyra. And I was a little hesitant at first to enter just because it's dark and it's got these sandbags built up over it. You'll see here in just a second on the entrance to the door that there are engravings, and these mention the names of the three brothers. And it is incredibly dark inside. And so we used the lights on our cell phones to be able to see the sarcophagi. And pre-ISIS, there were a number of frescoes on the inside of this tomb, and from the images that I saw, they were beautiful. But as you know, or as you could have guessed, ISIS destroyed most of them. I was able to find a picture of what the right back part of this tomb looked like. You can see the honeycomb design on the ceiling, and this was the only part that was still there when I visited, and I believe it's just because it was too high for any of the terrorists to reach. But on the columns, you will see there used to be these medallions with busts of those who were buried here. And you'll see here now we have walked into the first room on the right as you get in, and there are what's remaining of a few sarcophagi, and you can see here that the heads of these busts or these statues have been destroyed, and that was done by the terrorists that came here to Palmyra.
You can see all the faces destroyed and the hands cut off. But why the hands?
I was telling Austin that Palmyra had give a very big importance for the afterlife. Okay, so they sacred death as the sacred life. Here we have in Palmyra we used to have 4 kinds of tombs. We have the ladder tombs or the tower tombs, which used to be 3 or 4 flowers, and actually it exists only in Palmyra. Now it's all destroyed to the ground. We have, as you can see, the basement tombs, and this one is one of the famous, which called the Three Brothers, because it's for a whole family consisting of 3 brothers. Here we will see that we have 3 statues. Okay, so the way the Palmyrian decorated their tombs is we have the responsible of the family or the head of the family. It could be a man, could be a woman. He will be the one centering the scene and surrounding by the family members. Okay, and he will be holding the cup, which is the cup of death. You know. So that he's ready to surrender. Sorry, this is the cup of life. That he is ready now. He's holding with his hand the life he loved, and here we have his hand, which like he's like surrendering. He doesn't want life anymore because it means like we as humans, we want both. We want the afterlife, but we want life also. Okay. As you can see, they beheaded everything because I told you this is the hand that holding the cup of life. Here we have 3 ones because it's for the 3 brothers. You can see the details of the sculpting because Palmyrian had very, they cherished all the details, especially for the clothes because they wanted to show how rich and wealthy they are. Okay, and as you can see, it's all beheaded.
Yeah.
This is also another scenery, and this is the remains of the door that used to love this tomb.
We are now heading to our second stop on our tour of ancient Palmyra. This is the Roman Theater. It was built in the 2nd century and restored in the 1950s. It has become more well known recently within the last decade for some dark events that happened here, specifically in July of 2015. When ISIS had taken over this area, they released a video from this theater showing them lining up 25 young men and simultaneously executing them for the whole world to see. And if you were like me, when I watched that video, I would have never have guessed that within 9 years, I would be standing here at this site, seeing it for myself. And so it was just a very somber moment being here and just knowing the history of what recently has occurred in this very spot. After spending a few minutes in the Roman theater, we headed out to the Great Colonnade. And one thing I want to point out here is you'll notice these pedestals on each of the columns. And at one point, there were busts or statues of distinguished men with inscriptions written below of who they were. And so you'll see those on both sides as we walk down this colonnade. This road that we're walking on right now stretched for roughly 3/4 of a mile, and it linked the Temple of Bel, which is right in front of us where we're heading, to the West Gate, and then also the Funerary Temple. And the width of this main street varies in different areas between 14 meters and 10 meters. And at the very end, before we get to the Temple of Bel, we'll see the remains of the monumental arch that ISIS destroyed. These two pillars on our left and our right held what was once the monumental arch here. It was built in the 3rd century during the reign of Septimus Severus, and it linked the colonnade to the Temple of Bel, which we see right in front of us. It was restored in the 1930s, and it had a similar design to the work done at Leptis Magna in modern-day Libya. And it was destroyed by ISIS at some point between May and October of 2015. So just the same time period that all the destruction and all of the death happened here in Palmyra. And here you have a better view of where the monumental arch once stood. We have finally made it to our last stop in the ancient city of Palmyra, and this happens to be my favorite place here that we visited. And just to give you a few fun facts before we enter into the temple area, this temple was dedicated in the year 32 AD. And on top of Bel being worshipped here, the locals also worship the lunar god and the sun god here too. It was converted into a church during the Byzantine era, and as you could probably guess, it was later turned into a mosque in the year 1132, just like a number of the other religious sites here. I'm specifically thinking of the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. The mosque that was functioning inside of this temple complex was in use until the 1920s, so really long period of time that it was used, almost 800 years. And within this temple complex too, there were also a number of mud brick houses. It was almost like a village that they had inside the temple complex, and that was removed once the site was restored in the 1900s. This is the main courtyard here in the Temple of Bel. Right in front of us where we see this arch, that's where the inner chamber would have been, and that is the portion that ISIS destroyed when they were here in 2015. They used explosives and blew the entire inner chamber up. A few things to note. The northern chamber here in the temple complex had a bas relief of 7 planets that were known to the ancients at the time, and those 7 planets were surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac. In the court, there was a basin, an altar, and a dining hall, and the northwest corner had a ramp to lead sacrificial animals to the temple area. There are plans in place to restore this temple complex, but they have been put on hold due to the ongoing conflict that has occurred in Syria, and also more recently, the downfall of the Assad regime in 2024.